Today's guest is Justin Banon, the co-founder and CEO of Boson Protocol. Boson has raised over $35 million for their decentralized network, which is creating the future of commerce, specifically the ability to transact physical goods. So they've built version 1, releasing version 2 very shortly. And this is using escrow. It's using a mediation process to allow people, buyers and sellers, to discuss what happens if the goods aren't what they thought they were going to be, and effectively trying to compete with the credit card rails and the banking rails, e-commerce companies. So Justin and I talked about how he started the company. Justin graduated with a degree in physics from Imperial College of London. And we talked about how the government plays a role, or should or shouldn't play a role, in breaking up large companies, antitrust cases for monopolistic companies like Alibaba and Amazon. We kind of debated this. It wasn't clear. I think it's very nuanced on how large companies like that control large market share should be allowed or not allowed to grow. Justin is presenting at a conference very shortly, and we talked about what they're going to be announcing in version 2 of the Boson Protocol. So I hope you enjoy. Here is Justin Banon. All right, Justin, I'm excited to chat with you and learn more what you're working on. I was really excited to check out your background. I was impressed by the schooling that you went through. It certainly seems like you have an appetite for education. I'd love to get to that. Maybe let's start with what you're currently working on and are excited about, and have a great T-shirt saying the Boson Protocol. Boson Protocol.
Yeah.
Where did the name come from? What I think it may have came from. Can you talk a little bit about that and describe what the impetus was for the project?
Yeah, well, firstly, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, Mike. I mean, Boson Protocol, I came up with the name, and having a background in physics and stuff.
The Higgs.
It comes from, or a class of particles that are like a carrier particle, or, like a connector. And Boson connects the physical and digital worlds. Is like a commerce bridge. So that's how I came up with the name. And actually the logo is actually from what's called a Feynman diagram, which is a physics diagrams that describe the interactions of particles. So originally I went onto a physicist only website and just created this little logo, and then obviously graphic designers have taken that and worked on it. But it's actually,
and that comes from Richard Feynman.
Yeah,
the diagram.
Richard Feynman. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's pretty geeky.
And I believe CERN was the massive project to accelerate subatomic particles, smash them into each other. That was initially the impetus for this, was the Higgs boson field, right? It was to discover how do you, maybe you can articulate this with more clarity, but
what, in terms of Boson Protocol or the physics?
More the physics of it. So I thought there was a theory of the Higgs boson field, and then CERN effectively proved that.
They discovered it. I guess it was a couple of years ago now. It was predicted in theory, and then amazingly kind of discovered at CERN, was colliding particles, and produced this Higgs boson. Yeah.
And what about the protocol scheme or ambition patterned the boson, Higgs boson, or the boson? How did you kind of connect these two ideas?
Well, it was really kind of this concept of a carrier particle, and into my mind, what boson does is, one of the things it does is it enables you within Web3 or within the metaverse, or for like smart contracts to connect with real world commerce. And this is like two very, very distinct domains. So it enables you basically for smart contract-based systems to, whether that's like the metaverse or a Web3 or a DApp, to be able to execute real-world commerce without the need for an intermediary. So, for example, and there's a couple of problems there. One is called the fair exchange problem. One is called this kind of physical asset oracle problem. But basically, in e-commerce, if I want to buy your bicycle and I don't trust you, I don't know who you are, then, there's a problem of trust that either I send the money and trust I'll get the bike, or you send the bike and trust I'll send the money. And obviously in untrusting environments, that's a problem. And so typically e-commerce works where either you trust the seller because it's like Nike, or you don't trust the seller and then you use someone like eBay or Amazon as the intermediary. And so that's kind of how that problem is solved. But with Web3, it's all about removing intermediaries and not having to trust. And so we replaced those intermediaries with code. So we're kind of like the Uniswap for commerce. And that's the whole kind of big breakthrough of Boson. So that code is like a bridge. It's like a trust bridge. And so in my mind, those things are linked to kind of carrier particles and stuff like that.
I like it. And do you think of this conceptually as being a processor of payments? So if I'm in this specific example, if you're selling that great t-shirt, I want to buy it from you, say remotely, we hadn't met each other before. If I were to just send you Bitcoin, that would be a problem because there's no reversibility to it. And there's kind of an escrow problem, which credit card companies effectively solve, e-commerce, eBay solves. Is that kind of middle ground escrow time period what you view as the problem is?
Well, actually, there's kind of three problems. One is this fair exchange problem, which is, exactly as you've highlighted, that there's a reason why we have eBay and Amazon is because otherwise I'm going to be sending money and crossing my fingers. And so you have this trusted intermediary in the middle where you don't have trust on both sides. So that's one of the things. But we don't just enable this linear swapping payment. What we actually do is this intermediary stage. So what happens is, if you wanted to sell your bicycle, let's say, you would place an offer, and you might even lock up some funds to say, okay, I'm going to place this offer, and I'm going to, let's say it's a car, it's going to be $10,000, and you might even put a couple of $100 to say, I'll put this at stake so that if as the seller I don't come up with the goods, I don't show, or it's poor quality, whatever, that I will lose this couple of $100. And then as a buyer, I come and I will look and I say, okay, is this a trustworthy seller? No, I don't trust this seller. But you go, hold on, this seller's put like $500 in, so maybe I do trust them now, right? So I go, okay, I'm going to put $10,000 into this smart contract. The seller puts 500 in as their kind of commitment. And then maybe the seller's also saying to me, to ensure I'm not going to back out or mess them about, that I need to put some money into, skin in the game. And so you may end up with a smart contract with a payment amount locked up, a buyer deposit and a seller deposit. And so with that, you've got two incentivized individuals and the means for the transaction to go through. And that's kind of the basic escrow thing. But then the next stage is we kind of wrap that then into what we call a redeemable NFT. And that buyer then holds and custodies that NFT. Now, the key to that is that whoever holds that NFT has got the right either to get that physical item or their money back, right? Because it will, transaction will reverse. So suddenly you haven't just got this linear payment flow. You've got like a forward contract. So it's a bit like, if you want to go and buy pork bellies or cocoa, you can do it in Shanghai or whatever on a digital exchange and sell it to Canada and stuff. And no pork bellies move anywhere. You're just selling digitized forward contracts. And so that's what we do for physical things. And so the power of that is creating a single digital market for all the world's physical things. And for that to execute autonomously without the need for, individuals, intermediaries. So in the same way that, if you want to send me a SMS, you use SMS protocol. You want to send me an email, you use SMTP, and everyone uses the same standard. You want to send some data, we use TCP/IP. That, Boson Protocol can be thought of like TCP/IP for commerce, or more generally, for off-chain exchange.
Is it specifically for off-chain exchange, or would there be applications today or in the future for actual transacting of physical goods, or is it more the NFT?
Yeah, I mean, it's for physical goods. I mean, the mechanism is representing. You get a token that is redeemable for a physical good. In actual fact, Boson can kind of manage the exchange of digital goods and other NFTs as well, and those things all sort of bundle. So we enable like the sale of fidgetals or digital twins, where you buy a high-end pair of sneakers, you get the physical, you get a redeemable NFT for the physical, and you get another NFT, which is like the digital wearable that renders in the metaverse as a pair of sneakers, and those things can be sold as a pair.
Is there any issue with chargeback? I mean, the concept here being that the goods have not been delivered. It might be a service, but in this case, say a physical good was transacted, so an NFT maybe was exchanged hands. But in reality, this is a major issue for merchants because they might pay 3% on average for chargebacks, and credit cards offer this guarantee to consumers.
Yeah,
how does that play out?
So what happens is these funds are locked in escrow, and it's what's called an optimistic fair exchange protocol. So if everything goes fine, it's just like with Amazon. If I order, a bicycle from Amazon and do nothing else, the seller gets paid. It's only if I were to raise a dispute that it would stop the seller. So there's optimistic; it assumes the happy path, and we're the same, which is pretty efficient way of doing things. That's actually what we're in, like what's called an efficient optimistic fair exchange protocol, which is a bit of a mouthful, but that's the kind of formal definition. And so, I mean, what happens is if they're happy, if the buyer is not happy, they can raise a dispute, and then that goes through a two-stage process. So firstly, there is a piece of game theory, which is called the mutual resolution process. And what that does is it provides a mechanism for buyer and seller to discuss and propose, mutually agree, the division of the pot, right? So I say, look, you sent me this bike, look, the chain is broken or whatever, I bought your car, you said there was 100,000 miles, look, there's 120. And both parties try and come to an agreement. And there's a pretty detailed kind of contract that is agreed that tries to pre-set what the outcomes would be of different scenarios of sort of deviation from the agreement. And so try to make it as clear as possible what these different outcomes should be. Buyer and seller are encouraged to mutually resolve that. If they agree on a split of the pot and they submit that agreement to the smart contract, the protocol will just execute and give them those funds, right? And they're incentivized to agree. But however, if they don't agree, then the protocol will escalate to a dispute resolver. And so that dispute resolver could either be an independent, but centralized dispute resolver. So I may be buying your car from you, just directly, but Walmart may have agreed for a fee to resolve, for $20, they'll look at the case for any, their call center will look at a case and resolve dispute as a service, boom, for $20. And so we may choose, if it's a car, that we both trust Walmart, right? We don't need to go to Kleros or the arrogant court and pay a couple of $100 for a fully decentralized adjudicator, right? And so there's that decision that the seller assigns a dispute resolver and the buyer assesses whether or not they trust that dispute resolver, right? So if I was to buy a car from someone and it was a known, like in the UK we have the Automobile Association, I'd probably trust them to resolve a dispute. But if it was the other guy's best mate, I probably wouldn't. And so, so we have this kind of thing. And so what you have is this system of dispute resolution. It's a bit like how call center resolution is handled these days. Is they've got various levels of automated. They try and get the chatbots to handle you, and then they try and and then only finally, if all the automated processes fail, do you ever get to speak to someone. And that's a similar. We're using a piece of game theory to manage the main payload of disputes. And we've on the team at Boson, we've got some sort of incredible talent, like our protocol designer also works for the Ethereum Foundation designing ETH2. Our head legal engineer, advisor, is Dr. Primavera de Filippi, who wrote Blockchain at the Law and the Law teaches at Harvard. We've got two of the world's top game theorists designing. So,
So in the case of the second escalation, it goes to Walmart. Walmart is a placeholder for some large retail company with
it can go to any. The seller pre-assigns who will resolve disputes. What I'm saying is it could either go to this fully decentralized kind of dispute resolvers, or it could just go to it could go to a more lightweight kind of just, okay, we trust this kind of call center, or we try, a lot of call centers will do disputes as a service, for example. If you're in I don't know, the travel industry or something like that, and you've got a call center, you can have an overflow where you can agree with another call center that, hey, if I've got too many, I can't handle them. Will you do these disputes for me? Yeah, okay, they're like $12 each. Okay, right, fine, agreed. Yeah. So
it's interesting.
It can either be fully decentralized, or it could just be what we would call independent, and we both are happy that this is an independent third party.
And in the former case, if it's fully decentralized, that means there's a jury of people that each review this case.
And then there are various kind of decentralized courts and decentralized dispute resolvers, etc., that will do this kind of thing. But it's a bit slow. It's heavyweight. Yeah, it involves a lot of people because it's decentralized, and it can be, if we're just selling a bicycle, it could be maybe it adds too much cost and friction for that. So we might be happy to have it less trustless, but more efficient, and for commerce. And so you have this kind of trust grayscale that you can decide. Yeah,
it's interesting because it seems like that is such a Achilles heel of the commerce industry, right? Like credit card merchants generally despise the part of credit card companies that, for the most part, I'd say particularly American Express, leans heavily in favor of the consumer. So if you complain about anything, you may not even need to show any kind of proof. You just say, I'm unhappy with this dish. It's not what I thought it was going to be. And they just charge the merchant. And there's so much leverage that American Express has to the merchant that the merchant really is, they have no other option but just accept the slap in the wrist. And then on top of that, there's chargeback rates. So if a merchant gets above a certain percentage, like 3% chargebacks, then they're at risk of losing the credit card account. And if you're an online merchant, losing a credit card account is like losing your business. So I feel a lot of this is about leverage and about, okay, if I'm a merchant and I'm selling through Boson, and if I lose this case, meaning I'm willing to pay the full amount of the bicycle or the car or some large percentage of it, in exchange for that, maybe I keep my access on the network to exchange, and maybe I get a positive rating. So this person could say, okay, I'm happy with this exchange. I'm happy with the way the merchant has gone. Are ratings a part of the system as well, or will be?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, it's part of setting up these systems is to then evolve the systems and layer different bits of game theory and feedback on it. So there is, there are a couple of other actors where you have this sort of dispute resolver. So that could be Walmart or it could be Kleros. And so that's an actor that is paid to resolve disputes and gets paid a certain fixed fee per dispute, right? But then you have another actor called a sort of dispute mutualizer. And so what they do is they assess what is the risk of this seller triggering disputes. How often do I think this seller is going to trigger a dispute? And so what they will say to the seller is, okay, look, I'm going to insure or mutualize your transactions. If you pay me like $2 per transaction, any transactions that require escalation, I will cover the cost of that escalation. And so they kind of smooth so that, it's not like, okay, every time a seller, has to pay a dispute resolver and that on a per transaction basis. But then, and so that's the kind of, the first iteration of it. But then we've got, it's kind of sketched out some of these other, reputation kind of loops, for example, where sellers can sort of, benefit from having like low dispute rates or and also dispute resolvers can kind of get reputation for their sort of fairness and both from I guess the optimal would be for a dispute resolver to attempt to kind of walk that difficult path between keeping buyers and sellers happy. And there's a sort of a behavioral economic kind of theory that being fair is such a path, and that parties will kind of rate someone that's fair even if they don't adjudicate in their favor, that people see the benefit of just objective fairness. So there's quite a lot of game theory, but also behavioral economics. And I guess, the two are quite different. Game theory is very much got an assumption of rationality. Behavioral economics is like more actually how do people behave. And often it's not rational.
Interesting. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Like, would there be an example of something that
I can give you I can give you an example of something that is in behavioral economics that is not economically rational, and from a game theory perspective doesn't make sense. So, for example, if you and I were to be sort of sat in a room and someone were to kind of come in and say, "Oh, hi, okay, Justin, I've got $100 here, and I will give you $100. You give that $100 to me, provided that you and Mike can agree how to split that, right?" And if I said to you, "Okay, fine, Mike, you happy with $50? You'd probably say yes. Take the money, give you 50, give me 50, that's fine. But if I said, "Okay, Mike, you happy with $1? Okay," you might be like, "What? This isn't fair. I mean, that's just like greedy." You might turn around and say, "No, but I've just offered you $1. It's economically rational to accept it. Why are you not? Why are you going from $0 rather than $1? Game theory says we would always choose, the thing that maximizes your outcome, and that's an example of a behavioral economic factor that doesn't follow this assumption of economic rationality.
It's kind of interesting. I've heard this example before, and I've seen this game show. I have a thought on this: is that the parameters or the limits to what is thought of as the container for rationality is too tight. What I mean by that is we think of the way we understand humans as, okay, person A comes in, person B comes in, person A feels like this isn't fair, so they're willing to walk away with nothing instead of taking this deal. Why are they doing this? They should be doing this. But I think of it as the bigger picture is that this person feels that the person who's feeling that they're being treated unfairly is actually losing relative to the social hierarchy. So if this person, this is a lot of the source of the political agitation with tax rates, because if I pay a low tax rate, but some billionaire pays an even lower tax rate, like I'm going to be unhappy with that, because I know that the way money works, it's the backbone to the economy. It's the accounting system for value creation. And so if I'm being treated if I'm benefiting, like I'm getting $1, but then the Federal Reserve prints $1 trillion and gives it to everyone, well, in some level, I'm still losing, even though within this container I seem to be winning. And that's kind of how I rationalize the irrational behavior of it. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, look, to be honest, there is a big difference between theory and practice. We have one of the world's top game theorists and one of the world's top behavioral economists, and they kind of work together and they both come up with different theories. And one of the reasons why they really love working with Boson is they also get then to run these live experiments and evolve the Boson system whilst, you know, debating different hypotheses and testing them in the wild and seeing how people actually behave in these systems. So, you know, these kind of blockchain-based systems are giving economists, are turning economics into an experimental science for the first time.
Yeah, it's really exciting. The speed at which you can test these things and just the granularity of data that you have access to and being able to see everything on the network. So where are you guys? You've raised 35 million. I assume that's for a company, a private company, to then fund development for the protocol. Can you talk a little bit about like size of the project and how you structured it?
Yeah. So, well, the 35 million was raised by Boson Protocol, and it's been used to fund the development of a team that have designed and almost finished the build of version 2 of the protocol. And in fact, next week, I am going to be revealing version 2 of the protocol at the Ethereum Community Conference in Paris. And then we'll be launching that in a couple of months, sort of, around about September, October. And so that, we have V1 of the protocol live already. We did a whole load of, we've done a whole load of transactions and a whole load of brands, big brands like Tommy Hilfiger and Hogan and lots of like Web3 brands, enabling the sale of physical items as NFTs. Particularly we did within Decentraland at Metaverse Fashion Week. And then V2 is just much more scalable. It's got a lot more of the kind of features and functionalities that those early customers have asked for. Creating digital twins, having things like persistent royalties. So you've got these physical items that go from person to person and enable the original creators and stuff to kind of earn royalties as they pass hands and stuff. So so on the verge of kind of announcing this huge breakthrough and then launching the protocol with some really big partners as well.
Yeah, okay, awesome. And so the 35 million was part of the ICO that went into the protocol, and then I imagine you started a private company in England that then employs people, and part of the money raised. Can you talk a little bit more about the tokenomics and the flow of funds to fund the project?
Yeah, well, Redeemeum Labs has hired a whole load of people to build out version 2 of the protocol, and also sort of supports with all of the sort of marketing and providing the protocol with the support it needs to kind of grow. But we're following this whole progressive decentralization. So unlike other sort of models, we're actually kind of in the process now of starting to dissolve that. And once we've launched V2 of the protocol, the build of V3 will be done by some other teams within the community and also by more individuals, and then over a period of time move to a DAO which will accept proposals and disperse funds, and everything will be pretty decentralized. But in parallel, we've also developed a number of applications that sit on top of Boson Protocol, and so like Boson Portal, which is a marketplace, and also an application called MetaSeller, which is basically like Red Hat is to Linux. It's like a set of power tools that enable Web 2 brands to connect with Web 3. either because they need to use Boson at much greater scale than the free tools allow, or because they just need things like fiat, off-ramping and stuff like that. And so we've got these kind of two quite distinct, like fully decentralized protocol, completely permissionless, super Web3. But then, and I think this is just a really important thing for gaining adoption in Web3, is you've got demand, but you have to build, well, we've made a decision to help build those bridges to get Boson Protocol used, because there's quite a gap between a lot of the people that want to use Web3 and decentralized commerce and the capability that they have to use it.
And that would be the app layer. So building the apps on top of Boson allow for merchants to then find, somebody has to do it, right?
Yeah.
So you could either.
So if you're like a seller, if you're a seller if you want to just go and sell your bicycle or sell, a dozen or so items, then you're going to be fine with the Boson, free tools. It's a permissionless, minimally extractive protocol. You'll be fine. But if you want to sell thousands of items and manage inventory, and you're not particularly great at, kind of connecting wallets and doing all of that sort of stuff, then you need this kind of middleware. And so that's what MetaSeller is. And we didn't really, that wasn't our strategy. We just had, 9 out of the 10 people that wanted to use Boson didn't have the capability to use just the basic Web3 tools. So, here we are.
Yeah, they didn't have the capability to use the tools because it would require too much software development to implement the.
Either for two reasons: either because they weren't sufficiently Web3 capable, or because that they wanted to sell in such scale that tools for managing thousands of items needed to be built. And so, if there's lots of people that need tools to manage at scale, it makes sense to build those once, rather than have every seller that needs to use Boson has to do a $1 million, kind of piece of commerce middleware in order to sell at scale. Yeah.
And is part of the ambition or part of the goal from your perspective to get developers building on Boson? Or I know that for many projects that tends to be, that's the central goal.
I mean, the aim is for Boson Protocol. I mean, we're really just kind of, with some of these applications, priming the pump and getting some of the basic infrastructure in place. But absolutely, I mean, with the launch of V2, there's a whole SDK and, that's got like widgets that you can embed within your website and just a whole developer SDK so that you can embed Boson and build on it. And so, the whole philosophy of Boson is we do one thing well, and we're a piece of core Web3 infrastructure. And then, we want to compose and interoperate with all these amazing other projects. So absolutely, it's a complete ecosystem play for Boson, and it's not about us becoming some sort of decentralized Amazon. It's about being a key partner within a diverse ecosystem.
How do you feel about the competition in developers between this between building on Boson versus building the apps on Boson? So I certainly could see the appeal of developers on both sides. Say if I'm building an app, then I can go out and sell it to merchants and add in my own additional fee structure there. If I'm building on Boson Protocol underneath the app level, then maybe today it's more of like a standard company style where I'm interviewing with the chief technology officer and I'm going through this process, getting paid on payroll. In the future, it's moving towards more of a, like, how does that shift look like? I like to ask, different projects do it in different ways or have different ambitions for how that
I'm not
looks
100% sure I understand the question. So maybe you can just help me with that, and then I'll have to. Yeah.
Sure. What are the financial incentives? How would the structure for the financial incentive work for developers to contribute to the DAO when it's either fully or partially decentralized?
So, I mean, if developers are working for the DAO, then there will be like either bounties that they will be working on, or they will submit proposals which the DAO will agree, and pass, and then kind of disperse the funds. So that, when they're building on the DAO, and I think one of the major things in Web3 is that, okay, particularly if you're going to get paid in Boson tokens, for example, then, you have kind of skin in the game. If Boson becomes successful, then the value that you've got could multiply. But I think one of the primary drivers, and of course, financial value is important to all of us, but in Web3, it's like also people want to create a new, more open and democratic financial system and economy. And, the opportunity for Boson Protocol is to create this kind of base layer for commerce where everyone gets to share in the value they create. Instead of commerce being sort of massively extractive and, having 1 or 2 trillionaires like Amazon, Alibaba, you have, tens of thousands of millionaires, and everyone, the protocol itself, its fees are going to be like, they'll be set by the community, but probably somewhere in the region of like, 0.5% or something like that, right? And then the value accrued by, what could be a huge amount of transactions then gets recycled back to those participants through the token. And so I think that's a very, very, there's a financial play there, but also a lot of the people building these systems want to be, my primary driver is, having run a great big platform where I just extracted, is I wanted to build a system that would make a better world, and where, especially I've got, a young daughter, etc. I don't want a world where in 20 years' time, Jeff Bezos wins and Jack Ma wins, and there are 2 ways to buy and sell things, Alibaba and Amazon, right? And everybody works for them. They own the trucks, they own all of the packaging companies, the planes, all of everything. They're even, they're doing all this stuff now where they do the Amazon-owned products, right? So they're even competing. They're literally eating the entire supply chain, right? That's not what we want. We want lots of people. We want kind of level playing field capitalism, right? It's like, you wouldn't go to a ball game where people are wearing jetpacks and they're like armed with like lasers and stuff, right? And that's just how it's heading. So it's not just about the financial incentives, and obviously in Web3 they're enormous because, a project like Boson, if successful, could be the one layer for all commerce globally. And that is a big incentive for people for sure. But being part of building a future that's more open and democratic is what binds most of us in Web3.
Interesting. I would imagine that there's, what you're alluding to is there's some implicit price that consumers are paying for the monopolies or oligopolies that Amazon, Alibaba have. Is that obvious or?
Well, actually, going through, I forget, the lady's name is something Khan, who's the new sort of head of the antitrust division in the US. And I was reading one of those documents and actually was saying, well, actually, Amazon at the moment isn't causing massive price increases. Is that still consumer harm? Can we still have antitrust? And the argument is, well, we know that low price is a temporary tactic to gain massive market share, and that the moment, that these monopolies are in a position where they dominate the market, they've made it impossible for anybody to compete because they've got such scale and they're so vertically and horizontally integrated. We know what follows, right? What follows then is the maximum extraction, right? There's this whole imperative to do it. And so, we don't have to wait for the price signal to realize that this is inherently not good. We want a market that has, you know, a level playing field where people can innovate and compete, and where you do not get domination and monopoly. And I think that's really, really important to the, you know, the future economy, future society, probably future humanity.
Two things stand out for me when you articulate that. One is I think about everything that happens beyond the transaction. So the ability to manufacture the goods, the ability to ship the goods, those are all where I would imagine 99% of the value accumulation of Alibaba and Amazon is. It maybe just to you know, the whole part of it, like the checkout page and the actual transaction and the dispute process are certainly, maybe I shouldn't say 99, 95. Like they're a big part of the experience, but there's the vetting process of sellers on there. There's the aggregation of ratings. There's distribution. They own planes. They own all these, you know, they can get it to you in 2 days. I would see that as if a level playing field somehow, that when you say those words, I think of I don't quite understand it, because I think of a level playing field as, you know, who would own the planes, who would own the cars, who would own all the distribution to get it out there.
Really what we're saying is that the kind of the infrastructure and the governance of that infrastructure shouldn't be controlled by the few. So, for example, you need to control that governance of that infrastructure so that everything is interoperable. I mean, why are all of those Amazon systems behind this kind of, you know, walled garden and closed off, and you can't freely use that and because that's their kind of competitive advantage, right? And, you know, I think, you know, marketplaces themselves aren't bad. It's just when they get to that sort of scale. I mean, marketplaces add massive amounts of value by curating and, you know, and creating markets and doing all of these things. It's when they start to eat the world. I mean, we want to have, running on Boson Protocol, loads and loads of marketplaces, but running on a common infrastructure, so that when you list your products on this marketplace, it's also in a common language that everyone speaks. So you've got this like single market, single digital market for all physical products, right? Mm-hmm. And they all talk to each other, but no one is like able to kind of exclude others from that. And so, you know, another way to ask it is, why doesn't Amazon open as an open standard all of its back-end systems and its ways of, as an open API and that anyone can access? The reason is because its massive monopoly would suffer because of it. But for the smaller marketplaces and for, you know, that would be a net benefit, right? If everyone could sort of interoperate, it would be a net economic benefit. It's like, you know, in the early days of the internet, you had all these like walled gardens, right? Because they were trying to trap consumers. But now the fact that everybody can message and communicate and send files, and it's an open internet, there's much more like utility globally for everyone than everybody being walled within, you know. I mean, and you can go and search for information now on the internet and just you know, pretty much get any piece of information you want. You're not locked into whatever it was, like AOL or, you know, but you can't kind of generally go and you know, all the products are not in some sort of single market that's searchable and indexed, right? They're all in these silos, and that is like economically pretty inefficient.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think of it as the efficiency goes up when you have consolidation of resources. So, you know, you have Amazon owns and maintains and invests in all the shipping infrastructure out there. It's hyper efficient because it's hyper organized. And this is kind of the push and pull of mining too. Like you can get incredibly efficient mining services on Ethereum or so, and those would be consolidated in warehouses with hyper efficient servers, or you can pay a price and have less efficiency and more decentralization. And the market tends to prioritize, or has in the past, price. So they'll say, I'm willing to pay I'm willing to take a lower price and greater efficiency in exchange for this monopolistic back-end system that Amazon is. And what I'm hearing you say, which makes sense, is that there's an implicit price in the consolidation of capital with Amazon because Amazon has now power. They have leverage to extract at the top of the S curve. They could just turn on the dial and then increase the margin. And maybe they're financially incentivized to do that because they have shareholders in the market who want return on capital and dividends.
Yeah.
But also they kind of have diffused that argument in some way, I see, in that they tend to be relentless on reinvesting their profits in future projects like AWS or maybe it's space travel in the future.
Yeah, but there's two things there. I mean, the first thing you've said there is, actually addressed by one of my favorite posts, which is by Chris Dixon of A16Z, which is called Why Decentralization Matters. Basically, his argument is platforms always go from cooperation and trying to attract everyone to competition with their users and compliments and stuff because of this fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value. And so other people have said that this is extraction imperative. Initially, you're nice, you attract people because you need people to come onto the network. Once you've got those network effects, then it's not a choice. If you're a director of these companies, you have this responsibility to shareholders to maximize value, and that is from extraction. So it's described as inevitable, or as Gavin Wood, the Ethereum founder would call Web 2 is broken by design. It's a business model design that I studied, designed to lock in users and then kind of extract value from them, that type of thing. Web 3 is about enabling users to share in the value they create and own part of that sort of network. So yeah, I mean,
the only thing I'd add,
how I would view that. Yeah.
How do you push back on this, or how do you interpret this? I view the extraction process in the later stage of the S curve. So if Amazon did turn the dial on margin, extracted more money, raised their rates because they can, because there's no competition. So now we have what would be the concern of the antitrust situation. By doing so, they are decreasing leverage for competition, meaning that if there's another player out there that can compete in some way, well, now all of a sudden it's easier, the incentives are better to do so. So if Amazon did remain cheap, they would continue to have a moat, maybe they continue to reinvest in future projects. Whereas if they stopped innovating, extract margin, then all of a sudden it's like, well, now there's a new competitor on this. Either one of two things happens. The political agitation becomes so high because people are feeling the squeeze and they have no alternatives. So antitrust and government gets involved to break them up, or another player comes in the space. This quick aside, this reminds me of the debate in the US a few years ago. There was a big debate over to what level the internet service providers should be regulated. Should we think of it as like a class 1 utility or a class 2 utility, class 1 being more intensely regulated? The way I kind of saw that was against, this is where I just landed, was against net neutrality, in that I view hardware innovation and internet service providers as the same type of technological innovation process of the internet, although it's using hardware, so it's a little slower. So you might have a small town that has 5 or 6 towers. If you made that hyper-regulated, then you're effectively limiting or restricting the ability for innovation to occur. Whereas all of a sudden, now we have Starlink, and people almost didn't think that would be possible a few years ago. That all of a sudden we have beaming internet from the sky, or we have tiny little internet service providers. So there's a project on, I forget the name of it, but there's like a decentralization project of ISPs all over the place, providing people to peer-to-peer internet. It's like all those things. They're kind of the natural evolution of the free market. And so I don't know if any of that makes sense, but
yeah, I mean, it is a nuanced thing of enable and fostering innovation and rewarding innovation, but preventing runaway kind of, monopolies that create market failures. And certainly two of the sort of antidotes, well, one of the antidotes to that is regulation, and hey, has that gone far enough? Debate. But certainly the potential for Web3 has this potential of being a new paradigm that consumers choose. And it's like, okay, well, if I land in San Francisco and I've got a choice of two identical cars with identical drivers, one is on the Uber network, one is on like a decentralized network where that driver is going to be earning 30% more. Maybe I'm getting kind of paying 10% less, i.e. there's no middleman. Or if you and I went out for a beer and, there was a third person there who every time you or I bought a beer would get a free beer or take a cut of the transaction. We've all got mates like that. And I've got more than most. So, but, that's like, why do you need that? Why do you need that middleman if you can have software where we share the value that we create?
Right.
Why do we need someone else going, okay, you're about to hand over $30 to the barman. Okay, $10 for me. Thank you. It's comical, right? Mm-hmm. And that consumer choice is what Web3 represents. And I think, most big technology shifts happen when you have a consumer paradigm shift, right? So, and another example is 20, 30 years ago, maybe most sneakers were made in sort of sweatshops with terrible conditions for the employees. Now, no sneaker manufacturer could get away with, I don't think, selling sneakers with sweatshops in, Asia somewhere, or at least, the general consumer awareness and sentiment is very anti that. And I think you're seeing again now this realization, whether it's over extraction with the likes of, Amazon, or whether it's the sort of the data breaches of the likes of Facebook, that people are starting to see the game of these big tech giants it is broken by design.
Yeah. Well, it's being eclipsed by something better is how I would articulate. It's not broken compared to what came before, but just like any evolutionary process, it has its limits, and there's now a better alternative, so it looks broken. And I guess I land on this where I'm more skeptical about government intervention as the pathway to bettering social products and services, and more on like, let's just invent the future instead of just trying to destroy what currently exists.
I trust more the consumers to choose and the entrepreneurs to innovate than I do the bureaucrats to regulate.
Because if Amazon jacked up the price tomorrow, you should be celebrating, because now all of a sudden people are going to be looking what's out there, what else can I use, and that's part of the process. It's like Boson or any decentralized transaction protocol is going to look way better when the existing ones kind of on their last leg jack up prices. To me, it feels kind of like what the dictators that control the oil wells across the world are doing. It's like, well, we know we're moving to clean energy. We see the trends, solar, all the other methods are hitting like the strong up ramp. So let's just turn up the dial, extract as much as we can on our way out. And maybe that's just how systems work.
And it is very much like, okay, we got a great strategy. Let's just turn our prices up. Let's make the business case for electric cars. I see. Let's actually make them cheaper, right?
I want to talk a little bit about this World Economic Forum. You are, by the time this is going to be released, you will have been to and announced everything that you've been working on with.
Well, actually, that's a different thing. Okay. So the World Economic Forum, we got made a technology pioneer for Boson Protocol because it's just technology that's just got the potential to transform commerce globally. And that's so I'm kind of quite heavily involved now in the whole metaverse regulation and all of that. And but no, actually, next week we are at the other end of the spectrum from quite centralized to decentralized at the Ethereum Community Conference in Paris, which is going to be a lovely 38 degrees in the city, and which is like what 130 or something Fahrenheit, and where we'll be revealing something crazy,
super hot,
maybe 125, where we'll be unveiling version 2 of Boson Protocol to like the deepest tech crypto audience on the planet. So really excited to be doing that, and with all the major teams there, and just kind of that's my first proper deep crypto conference since before COVID. So really looking forward to it.
And what's the knockout punch? So this will come out after, so you're not divulging anything here. But what are the key pieces that you're most excited about?
Well, I mean, you can think of Boson Protocol V2 as like Uniswap for e-commerce, whereas with Uniswap you put one token in, you get another token out, and it's just code. And with Boson Protocol, you put your payment in and you get your product out or your money back, and it's code. And then the kind of second thing is that whole thing is wrapped into this redeemable NFT. There's quite a few people doing redeemable NFTs, but it's always like, here's my NFT, here's an NFT, trust me, I will redeem this for the physical item. But with Boson, it's kind of got game theory and kind of deposits within this NFT. That means it's all done trustlessly. So it's this kind of real breakthrough foundational piece of Web3 that connects Web3 to the real world and real world commerce. So the kind of sneak previews that I've shared of the white paper that we're publishing next week have just kind of got real rave reviews from the kind of crypto insiders and stuff. So it's going to be pretty full on.
And is a big part of this what we were talking about earlier, the methodology for solving disputes on physical items? Is that like the trunk of the tree, or is there like that's the...
Yeah, that's like the core. So within the core, I mean, it's basically this efficient, optimistic, fair exchange protocol that locks up commitment deposits from both sides, locks up a payment amount, and then uses two stages of firstly, game theory for this, what's called the mutual resolution kind of stage. So if the buyer and seller disagree, they are encouraged to resolve it and agree a split of the pot. If they fail to do that, it will then escalate to a dispute resolver. It could either be fully decentralized like a Kleros or an Aragon core, or could be an independent sort of dispute resolver that's sort of pre-agreed, but cheaper but not as trustless. And so that's the core of the mechanism. Then there's some like DeFi mechanisms that mutualize costs, assess the kind of reputation of sellers, etc. But all built by some of the kind of best crypto people on the planet. So really looking forward to kind of sharing that and getting into some deep technical and game theoretic arguments with all the other geeks and crypto people that are going to be there. So
Yeah, I like what you're building because it is highly technical and it relies on game theory, and it's also incorporating real life friction. Are you going to partner with Walmart to have a call center, and how do you structure a call center? And I like that it has the less glamorous but more fundamental parts of how people actually deliver goods and services. Trading NFTs online 100% electronically in pure code, there's a ton of competition for that. It's definitely valuable infrastructure to build, but the trading of physical products is such a foundational layer. I mean, I would imagine the vast majority of commerce is on physical products as opposed to digital ones in the average person's life. How is that received?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a $30 trillion. Yeah. I mean, it's a $30 trillion market, and I mean, obviously, it's a major known problem, and it's actually pretty fundamental to like Web3 and smart contracts, because if you need a centralized intermediary in order to kind of be able to redeem real world commerce. So, for example, if you tokenize your car, I buy that token. I have to trust Mike is going to give me the car in return for that token. That's, okay, with you, Mike, you're a trustworthy guy, that's fine. But, having to trust someone is kind of like what blockchains try and eliminate. And if the other option is I have to have a trusted intermediary because I can't trust, then that's, again, what blockchains are trying to eliminate. So, here is a way for blockchains to do commerce and exchange with the real world using code and without intermediaries. Independent dispute resolvers, but they aren't kind of controlling or don't have outsized power in the kind of transaction. And so it's a pretty fundamental kind of bridge. Yeah.
It's awesome. And you mentioned Chris Dixon's article, Why Decentralization Matters. Are there other people, other books or blogs that have inspired you or educated you down this path that you want to throw out there? There's a lot. Another one that I think is amazing is Chris Burniske from Placeholder VCs, protocols as minimally extractive coordinators. I think those two are kind of like fundamental. And so that's just talking about the role of protocols. And then we're also, one of our kind of advisors and works for us as a consultant, a guy called Sangeet Chowdhury, who's written a couple of books on platform theory, like Platform Revolution, etc. He's also publishing, we've sort of sponsored this whole set of research on taking Web 2 platform theory and applying it to Web 3, and creating this new toolkit for entrepreneurs to be able to kind of use tokenized network effects, etc., and really looking at this kind of unbundling of governance and infrastructure. And the stuff that has been created there is amazing. So I would encourage your listeners to look out for that. That's going to be published in September, around about the launch of Boson V2. And so alongside this kind of, big piece of technology is this big chunk of like research on, carrying platform theory into Web3 as a kind of public resource for Web3 entrepreneurs to try and change the world. I like that. So Chris, you mentioned those two again. Chris, I have a place for minimally extracted. Burniske. Okay. Yeah,
Chris Burniske. And it's he's from placeholder.vc, and it's protocols as minimally extractive coordinators.
I like that. And then Platform Revolution.
Yeah.
Awesome. And where are you personally online? We'll have all the show notes for Boson, or the links for Boson in the show notes. Are you on Twitter, writing anywhere?
Yeah. I'm on Twitter at Justin Banon, Banon, and it's got all my other links on from that Twitter account. And I haven't been tweeting that much lately because I've been doing 18 hours a day on all this kind of writing for V2 white papers and stuff. But as of next week, it's going to be kind of sharing loads and loads of stuff. So by all means follow me, and I'll keep you all up to date with the amazing kind of news at Boson.
Yeah, I love it. Man, there's so many things I wanted to talk to you about, the physics and your past projects, but maybe we'll have to do another episode someday. This time flew by. Yeah,
or maybe next time you're in London or I'm in Oregon, we'll have to have a beer and chat about some of these things.
Let's do it. Thanks so much, Justin. Wish you the best.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a real pleasure.